Okay. Well, three, two, one. Hello, everyone. Welcome to, and I just forgot the episode. We literally just spoke about this. I think it's 64. Like, no less than 30 seconds ago, we just talked about it. Welcome. Sorry, that was a bad intro, but welcome. I think we're on episode 64 of Security, and this is actually a viewer email that we got that we want to talk about specifically with Google Drive. But before we get there, this is going to go on all the shows on In 30. Basically, we want your inputs. The question is, do you want a show every single week from all the podcasts, whether it be In 30, Security, or when we get education up and running, or do you want us to give you a quality, content-filled episode that's less than once a week, maybe one every other week, everything else? And what I do know from people is that they like the consistency of every whatever. I push this out every Tuesday at 7 a.m. That every Tuesday at 7 a.m. you get a security episode, or on the weekend you get an In 30 episode. But we just want your feedback. We're thinking on In 30 to do you'll have a show every week. But what do you want? Security lends itself to more shows more frequently. But if we don't have a good show, I think it's in our best interest to skip. We can give you a reason why, whatever it is, but I don't know. That's what we were running around. So, Tom, do you have any thoughts on that before we get started?
Um, it's not, a surprise, and we've run into this before, and people do notice it, that occasionally we will have just a dead week in security news, where some, really high-level news comes out, like, hey, there's this bug that doesn't at all affect the end user, but, you server administrators, you should probably patch that. Or something like really esoteric happens, like, hey, you should probably use these ciphers and this SSL suite. Something that most normal people can't apply to their everyday lives, and we don't really have content and have to come up with stuff on the fly. We do that. I think we do a pretty decent job at it. But, if you guys don't like kind of the filler episodes that do happen, that are more filler and less meaty content, let us know. Because I know we've, in the past, grasped at straws a little bit, trying to bring you some content for the week. And if it's every other week, I think that would happen a decent amount less.
I mean, if there's something obvious, it doesn't matter. It's just we want to make sure that we try to be consistent and try to bring you a good show. We are going to try and get better audio. I know that has always been an issue, but it's on me to cut the episode and do everything. So I like taking the Hangout audio, but we're going to try and record each end and make it better. And going every other week makes it. But like I said, we want to hear your feedback. If you want an episode a week, we're okay with that. We have no problem. So we'll go from there. So the topic today, I guess, Tom, you should explain this because you were the one that got the email.
Yeah, so a longtime listener emailed us, and we've kept in contact. He actually ran into a really nasty problem with Google Drive. And it's nothing he did on his end. It's just simply what looks like a bug in Google Drive. And it really brings up the topic, okay, we all know about, hey, we have to keep our passwords safe. We have to enable two-factor authentication. But one of the big kind of gotchas that happens with these cloud providers, with internet sites, or with any application really, is that bugs happen. And sometimes bugs will result in really nasty security holes, or annoying things, or just weird things that you can't really explain. Well, in this listener's case, he had he was doing a search in Google Drive for some of his files, and just out of nowhere, out of the blue, it was populated with some other user's files. He didn't have access to these files. He didn't click a public link. It wasn't shared with him to his knowledge. It just appeared. And he has access to tons and tons of these files from this guy. And not only can he see them in the list, he can download them, he can access it with his phone, with the official Google Drive app. he can download local copies to his device. And he emailed Google saying, hey, I think this is a problem. These just showed up and I don't know why. And this is a technical guy. This is a guy who understands how these things work and understands that, if he clicks a link from Drive, they're going to show up in there. And he doesn't know how he has access to this other user's files. As far as he can tell, they're not supposed to be shared with him. And Google is basically saying, oh, well, he probably shared it and you just don't know it. And there's been a lot of back and forth, but it seems like no one really has any idea what's going on with this. He's got access to another user's files, and no one knows why. And these bugs happen fairly occasionally. With Drive in particular, I have gotten the bug on numerous occasions where I've shared something with someone, and I tried to delete the file, and it just won't delete. Even if I try to take away permissions later, it says, oh, well, you've already deleted it. You can still see it, it's still in here, and you can't access it. You can't delete it, and you can't unshare it because you don't have the file. And it's one of these hair-pulling bugs that I have to email Google about every time it happens and say, hey, look, this is a problem. What happened with this, and why can't I get rid of it? Because it's taking up space in my drive, but it doesn't exist, but it does, but I can't change the permissions because I don't have access. It's this weird nexus of permissions. It's like Schrodinger's Google Drive. It exists and it doesn't exist all at the same time.
I've had that problem.
It's a common problem.
And it's one of those. I felt like channeling my inner nerd. It sounds like a file system problem where there was a lock on the file. Somehow it got deleted, and then the pointer just didn't get dereferenced, and now it's still there, but there's no pointer. And it used to be restart the computer, start it in safe mode, and that would fix it. But there's no safe mode in the cloud.
And these kinds of bugs, I will dare to say they are not rare. Remember, these systems are not coded by, at least most systems, right? Most sites on the internet aren't coded by super geniuses. They're coded by everyday people like you and me. They just make stuff and put it on the internet. And bugs happen because computer programs are made by people. And sometimes those computer errors will result in you getting access to someone else's files, or you not being able to remove a file or remove sharing from a file that's legitimately yours. And with Drive in particular, we've both seen the weird I can't delete this file bug. I've actually seen once another user's files that I didn't think I had access to. I logged out, logged back in because I was kind of weirded out. I was like, okay, that's weird. Did I get, did authentication get messed up? Did I log in as someone else? And it corrected itself. It was fine. But I've seen similar issues in the past. I really think we need to bring this up, not to shame Google, not to yell at them and say they do a terrible job or anything like that, but bugs like this happen, and sometimes, and unfortunately for Google, you can't automate all bug fixes. Sometimes you've got to get a human in there to do the dirty work.
Well, from the email, it sounds like this was a tier 1 person. I mean, it sounded like you were reading this email, and it was basically like, oh, how can we help you? Well, we have this really nasty bug, and the world's going to end. Oh, thank you for getting back to us. We'll look into it and contact you within 72 hours. And it just sounded like they didn't read it. I mean, it just read like, we really don't know. We don't know what's going on, but we'll look into it at some point. This doesn't seem to be. And then the person said, no, you don't understand. This is a big deal. And then they said, well, did you unplug it? Like the typical script stuff. And the problem is when you do this with email, it doesn't happen instantaneous. It happens faster than sending a regular letter or whatever it is. But a simple phone call would have, I mean, I think 5 minutes on the phone would have done a lot more than a 10 thread or whatever you want to call it back and forth.
And unfortunately, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Dropbox, a lot of these guys, they either don't have phone numbers or their phone numbers are almost impossible to find.
Well, they do that on purpose. I mean,
Yeah,
I've never done.
that's
Have you
whatever
ever
we're
done?
calling them.
Have you done CSR ever in your life?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
so
I have.
I
It
have
is,
not.
it is a horrible experience.
I mean, because you get people that will call you for every little thing, and you know what? You don't want to hide the phone number. I mean, I have Amazon's phone number somewhere. That's not that easy to find. It's
Yeah.
not hard, but it takes you a little bit of searching, and because they really try to push you into some sort of offline communication that they can get one person handling 30 people at the same time. But to call them, you call them, they do solve the problem. At least with me, in 5 minutes, they get me off the phone, and I'm happy generally with the solution. So, with that said, I mean, Google, you really can't. You call on their certain things. Even Google Glass, you call and there's a hold,
Yeah.
and
Which
it's
is
just,
really odd because you'd think that the amount of people with Google Glass is a really small number, but yeah, there is a hold time on that.
and so it's now you're putting in what do you want to do, and unfortunately, it's with Google. I bet if they opened it up, people will be calling for everything. And I remember one of the Google Doodles was Pac-Man, and people were calling Best Buy, and Best Buy had like a task force to say, no, no, this will go away tomorrow. It's just a Google Doodle. So,
In one of my previous jobs, I was help desk slash customer service representative slash go out and fix this person's computer. The basic, tier one help desk guy. And this company had a bunch of different departments and a bunch of different people called for a bunch of different reasons, but every department had like a phone number that you were supposed to call. Unfortunately, the computer people at the bottom of every web page said help desk and phone number right next to it. So no matter where you were at on the website, you had a direct line to tech support. So I would get calls for every single department, and I had to essentially play most of my day was spent playing operator between no, this is the number for this, or hang on, let me transfer you to that department, and it was bad.
let's take it. So a user has a problem. Like in this case, it's the cloud. It's not a local file system permission like a restart would do, or booting into Linux and then deleting the file. Something got corrupted. Something happened. And I mean, this sounds like a cron job. This sounds like it just needs to some trash collector needs to parse through all the files and analyze permissions. But when you're looking at the scale like Google, I don't think it happens every day, every week, every month.
I think there was legitimately a permissions gap, and most things on websites, on big giant sites like this, like Google, like Facebook, Twitter, especially something like Google or Dropbox, where you're sharing big files all the time. There are automated scripts that happen all the time, and here's a secret: people that build websites, and I've built websites, decently sized websites, we try to do the best we can. We have acceptance testing, we have unit tests, and we try to make them all green and make them all 100%, yeah, we're really, really sure this isn't going to fail or blow anything up. It still happens, and why it still happens is the edge case. Maybe one guy was like an early user of Google Drive, and he had like his level of Google Drive was so early that he had different API calls and something didn't work properly, and somehow his permissions got switched so that the original user is able to see his files. That's a possibility. Again, we don't know what caused this, but the fact is still Google should fix this, and they should really pay more attention to it. At the end of this episode, we're going to put out a call for help to the Google Drive team, to some Googlers that we've interacted with in the past, and try to get this thing fixed. And we need a closer look taken at stuff like this, and more importantly, for the average user, for the person at home, what can you do? You don't work at Google or Dropbox or SpiderOak or wherever. What can you do to make sure, even if you are the victim of one of these bugs, how could you prevent it? Well, for one, anything that you put up on Dropbox, Google Drive, wherever, if you want to make sure that if the files are wide open to the internet, that people still can't get access to your data, encrypt it before you throw it up there. It's actually pretty easy to do.
Well, before that, I don't know if people understand, and I think it's just let's take a minute to talk about it. When you get 5 gigs of Dropbox space or 15 gigs of Google Drive space, it's not all it's your 15 gigs, absolutely. But let's say everyone's sharing this gigantic file. It's a gig or 2 gigs. Not everyone keeps it in their drive. They have a central repository, and it just points, and it says, okay, you have this file, that's 2 gigs. That's how they get around giving everyone 15 gigs or whatever it is to keep costs down. So when you have that large file and you're sharing it with 10 people, there's only 1 copy. So again, something like the pointer didn't get dereferenced or it didn't go away is most likely the culprit. But if you encrypt it, it's your file and only your file because the hashes will never be the same.
Right. It'll be entirely unique.
So
it will be astronomically unique, mathematically speaking.
Yes.
It'll be as unique as you care to have it.
Okay. And well, I mean, now let me ask you this: if we both had the same encrypted file, they will obviously put a pointer to one of the files to both files, and they'll host it. But the chances of I mean, so if we're sharing something, I mean, if we're sharing a large movie or whatever it is, a legally downloaded movie, and we encrypt it and just share it between us two, they're going to have 1 copy. They're not going to have 2.
Right. But if we use, in certain encryption schemes, if we use different passwords to encrypt that file, there'll be different files.
And not to say, I mean, we looked at some of these files. I don't think many of these files were duplicatable. I mean, it wasn't like, it didn't say like the interview torrent here. It was weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of screenshots in here, and we can actually see the files. And there's stuff on here that looks like personal backups or configuration files, and frankly, this other user doesn't seem like a layman user. It doesn't seem like a guy who would just click share on everything and leave it alone. Some of these files are, I don't want to give too much away because it's someone else's personal information exposed through a bug, but these are some technical things that this person has access to. And I think they probably know their way around a computer and around Google Drive specifically. So it really looks like a bug. It really looks like a nasty bug.
But again, we need to point out that if you're putting it on somebody else's cloud, you have to assume that, not that this would happen. You never want to assume that something like this would happen, but you don't want to assume that it's completely siloed and no one else will see it.
Right.
Okay. You can't go freak out and say the government is spying on us, all this and everything else, and then care and then worry about this, because you put it in the cloud. It's Google stuff. It's a free service, and they made an issue, but you're expecting them not to. So the first off, just remember that whatever you put out there potentially could get away. You do have your expectation, and this expectation was breached, but this is clearly by accident.
Right. You should treat it like anything else when it comes to security. You should prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So, using your credit card at Target or Home Depot. Well, you prepare for the worst by watching your bank statements, watching your credit card statements, making sure nothing nefarious is happening. By using the credit cards with really good proven protections behind them. And that's how you prepare for the worst, and you hope for the best by just swiping the card and signing the pad. And assuming and hoping and praying that Home Depot and Target don't leak everyone's credit card numbers to the world through some really nasty security oversight.
Well,
but it happens sometimes, and being prepared will help alleviate some of that.
And then one of Google's suggestions, and I hate when they tell you to do their job, because that's what it sounds like. Why don't you contact the owner? And I'm not saying that's the worst scenario in every case, but in this case, it's not our viewer's job to contact the person. This is not Facebook. When your friend posts a photo that you don't want, Facebook actually does tell you, hey, before we do anything, can you talk to your friend? If they're your friend, can you ask them to remove it or talk to the person? Because that conversation of why it's inappropriate may make you a better internet citizen, all this other stuff. And then Facebook will remove a photo that you don't want there. But in this case, the listener doesn't know the other person. It's not something. It's going to scare both of them. Oh, by the way, your personal files are there. It's going to make the other person all now paranoid that Google is sharing stuff. And what else are they sharing? This is something to say. Okay, we're going to look into it. We should flag your accounts, and we will send it to tier 2, tier 3, all the way up until we solve it.
And I don't want to make this into a bigger issue than it is, because we only have, my personal hearsay of encountering it once for a very brief amount of time, and then it vanished without a trace, and then our listener. So, maybe 1.5 confirmed cases. I don't want to make this seem like an epidemic, but we don't have, the biggest listener base in the world. We love our listeners. We wish more people would listen, but not everyone in the world listens. How many other people has this happened to? We don't know. Is this a really small bug that affects, 3 people? Is it a small bug that affects 1 person? Is it a small bug that affects 1,000 people? I don't know. But if this is more widespread, it should really be looked at, and looked at very carefully. And, thankfully, our listener was nice, was security conscious, was morally correct in contacting Google and saying, hey, I think I have access to something I really shouldn't have access to. And if you're ever in the position where you have access to things that you shouldn't, the morally right thing to do is to come forward and say, hey, you might want to look into this and fix it, because I shouldn't be seeing these things. I've had to do it with service providers that accidentally gave me access. It was an email provider that will go nameless. They accidentally sent in an email, in a trouble ticket to me, the corporate password that controls every single one of the other businesses' accounts. Basically, the full master password for their entire web service, they leaked in an email. And I emailed back and said, hey, you might want to change this. Also make your password longer.
And by the way, I didn't do anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
Because, you want to show, hey, hopefully maybe you get free stuff, maybe you get a pat on the back, an honor, whatever it is, but you don't want to be suspected. People always say, here, I want you to hold my apartment key. And I usually tell them, you know what, I'd rather you not give it to me, because I don't want to be liable. If this could be a test for, I don't want to say this could be a test, but this could be a test to see if this person comes forward, and you don't want to be in that position. But in this case, yeah, you see something you don't like, it's important to, or you get something you shouldn't get. That's why the bottom of all those corporate emails say this communication is between person A and B, and if you see it, you should take it upon yourself to delete it and not read it, and all this other nonsense, which, by the way, doesn't hold anything in any court of law.
I make, and this is morally reprehensible, I make a note to read every single one of those emails if they have that disclaimer at the bottom, just to prove to myself that the disclaimer doesn't do anything. It doesn't stop anyone.
Well, so
just make sure to watch your your CC, and your BCC fields when you send something.
Well, yeah, and make sure you spell things right. That's always the hardest part. But okay, so the problem is, and I don't know if our listener tried deleting the information, but that's the last thing you want. What happens if he deleted the information? Does that delete on the other person's account? Yeah,
it just vanishes from someone's drive. I'd be really angry if someone had access to, my Dropbox account or my Google Drive account, and files just vanished. I'd be like, dude, come on. I've got local backups of that stuff, but I've got to re-upload it, and then I've got to figure out how you deleted it, and and not to mention the fact that it would freak me out. I'd be worried. I'd be shaking in my boots. But how on earth, who deleted the stuff out of my Google Drive if it wasn't me?
And then how do you go to your boss and say, the business presentation was deleted from my drive and it wasn't me? But here's the issue that I always have with large companies like this. I don't understand it, but I sort of do. I don't think anybody wants to admit guilt, because admitting guilt, especially in writing, is saying that you knew that something was wrong. Saying that we don't know how to fix this it makes me feel better because I'm a tech person and I understand this. But telling this to the average person, we don't know what to do, the answer is going to be, well, that's a problem. You need to fix it. And if you don't know what to do, what do you expect us to do? And and I think that's why they play coy and they try to pass the buck along for as long as they can. In the background, they're trying to fix this. But I do know from Google, I brought up a security thing in the past, and they took it up. They didn't tell me what to do. They sort of tongue-in-cheek and say, why was it important? They looked into it, and then a month or two later, it was fixed, and I was happy. And I didn't even file a ticket. I just told it to one of the Google engineers who replicated it and said, oh, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's... some companies will take this seriously, and some companies, when people point out really, really nasty security bugs and really horrible flaws, some companies will completely ignore it. And it has happened time and time again, and it will continue happening, where someone comes forward and says, this is a bad security issue, you should fix this. Please, for the love of God, fix this issue. And the company just goes, it's not a business priority, so we're going to ignore it for 3 months. And that's when you get hackers coming out and saying, the good guy hackers, even just users that report issues, coming out and saying, hey, here's a security flaw. I have waited, X amount of time. I've given the company this much time and they haven't fixed it. Here's how to hack these guys, or here's the security flaw, or here's some information leak on these guys' parts. And it kind of kicks them in the rear and gets them moving a little bit faster because now it's public information. Now they can be actively exploited. Now they have to fix it. And I don't think this is an exploit. I don't think this is a hack. This is clearly a bug of some kind.
But probably they can't replicate it either. I think that's the bigger issue.
Yeah, it's probably a really hard to track down bug. And in software, software is complex as the Google ecosystem, and Google Drive is an entire product. Narrowing down a bug like that small and that tiny, and permissions are, hard to get right in big, giant shared systems like that. They're hard enough as it is. But having something that you can't replicate easily, that's got to be... They've got to be pulling their hair out trying to fix stuff like this. I can't even imagine being on the QA team.
If I had to make a suggestion or a solution in this, and this is probably the hardest brute force way, they asked the person to contact the other person. We discussed that's not the right thing. But I think it's on Google to say, look, you're not going to be happy with the solution, but maybe move all your files out of Google Drive, all your files, download them all, disconnect it, have it locally backed up, then go to Google Drive and basically delete everything while we go to the other guy and say, hey, we noticed something, you should do the same thing. And maybe that's the way to do it. Basically clear out both Google Drives and put it back in. But again, that's not convenient, and it's the worst way to do it without solving the problem. But like I said, it's probably some sort of permission error on the file system and not a user error. But
it's hopefully we'll see the end of it, and we will update the rest of you as to what happens with the situation. But it's one of those things. If you want to make sure that even if your stuff is posted online on some public forum where anyone can access it, it's all your files are downloadable on the front page of Facebook forever for everyone. If you encrypt the stuff before you put it up there, not such a big deal unless you're using really bad encryption. So, stick with the good versions of TrueCrypt, stick with PGP. GPG is a fantastic application, if a little hard to use. And, have fun with it. Be safe.
Okay.
I love TrueCrypt. TrueCrypt is great.
Yes.
Makes encryption easy and fun.
Well, not fun, but easy.
I'm going to fork TrueCrypt and put Flappy Bird into it, and then it would be fun and easy.
Yeah, to decrypt it, you have to get through, past level 10.
Yeah.
Make it really hard. Okay, well, we're running out of time, so let's say bye. We hope after I stitch this audio together, the audio will come out much better. And like I said, we're trying to go to this either every other week or when we only have relevant content so we don't bore you with filler episodes. And hopefully we get
Yeah,
better
let us know.
everything, better show notes, better everything. So, anyway, have a good day.
Just to mention, because I forgot to at the top of the show, Tom Wheeler, chairman of the FCC, has proposed Title II regulation for the internet. And, while it's not the perfect solution, it's clearly a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
It will remove a lot of the really nasty things that ISPs are trying to get away with, like throttling or blocking things or slowing down your Netflix account. So I really hope this is going to be instantly taken to court, and the FCC is going to get sued by several big companies, and I hope they see it through. But it's a step in the right direction, and things are looking up in the net neutrality battle. I'm really happy with how things have turned out so far.
Okay. Well, we'll see everyone next week, and hopefully this is the best sounding episode we've done so far. Anyway, guys, have a good week.
See you guys.
Bye.